Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nemeka Onyeka Oderere. I did a post on my Facebook page and Twitter page. I saw the Bloomberg report that the European Central Bank, monetary policy rate is at 2%, even for the long term. And I ask just generally for people to let me understand, let me have an understanding of their understanding of the economic implication of the ECB rate at 2%. And interestingly and shockingly, a majority of the people who commented on, who made their comments on the trade did not really understand the economic implications of the ECB keeping their rates at 2%. So now let me explain it. Let me explain it. Let me explain it for the benefit of those who want to understand the economic implications of leaving the ECB rate at 2%, even on the longer terms. What is the monetary policy rate? Monetary policy rate is the discount rate, is the rate at which the central bank of any country borrows from the system. Is a discount rate. Is actually the risk-free rate. Is the rate upon which every other lender, marks their premium. And at 2% monetary policy rate. For context, for those who do not know, the monetary policy rate in Nigeria today is at 27%. It is the Central Bank of Nigeria risk-free rate. Every other lender in the system will benchmark their lending rate to the central bank monetary policy rate. That is why if you go to the bank to borrow money, no bank will lend you money at a concessional rate lower than 27%, especially for commercial purposes. That is why cost of funds today is so high. That is why any investor or entrepreneur or manufacturer will always factor in cost of borrowing, which ranges between 30%, 35% today in Nigeria, depending on the risk assessment of the bank. So the ECB rate at 2% simply means commercial banks can lend at 3% or less than that, or even 4% or 2.5% in Europe. And the implication is just very simple. It makes borrowing cheaper for businesses and households. Because of this cheap, low single-digit monetary policy rate, it stimulates investment and consumer spending. But it has other side effects. It also signals stability. At 2%, it signals stability. It also shows that inflation has actually been moderated. They put inflation under control at that 2%. But what will happen here is that it will make the euro, which is the currency of the European Union, to lose value compared to other convertible currencies like the dollar, like the pound sterling, which will also make their export relatively cheaper, because most of the EU countries like Germany, like France, like Spain, like Netherlands are huge producers. So at the lower rate of 2%, most investors may want to migrate to other climes where they may have higher rates, like in the US where the NPR is higher and all those stuff. So moving funds from euro to other currencies will decrease the value of the euro, which will of course make their exports cheaper. That is why you see China from time to time. China try to manipulate the yuan to make it decrease in value so as to make their export cheaper. For countries that are highly productive, the decrease in value of your currency will enable you to make your product, your cost of your products cheaper relative to other convertible currencies. So, the problem we have in Nigeria is that a majority of us do not even have basic understanding of economics. A majority of us do not have basic understanding of economics. You see, that's why sometimes when we cry and say, oh, those on the physical side should help Yemi Cardoso, most people will not understand it. Monetary policy rate is at 27%, not because of the makings of Yemi Cardoso. What the CBN governor or the CBN authorities are trying to do, monetary authorities are trying to do in Abuja, is that they are trying to, at that 27% interest rate, you can see clearly with dollar hedged, you can see clearly that an investor in any of the European countries can actually borrow money and use that money to come and collateralize that lending and use the money to buy Nigerian debt instruments at 21%. So what is simply that, he brings us his money, secures certificate of capital importation. Of course, CBN has shown clear that you can bring in your money and you take out your money with relative stability at about 1,500 level to $1. So the guy comes in here, 1 year, he makes 21% return on investment. He changes his money back to dollar, flights it back to the bankers that lent him the money, pay back his debt, which he must have borrowed at 3%. And you have a huge margin of almost about 70. There's no other place in the whole world where you make that kind of money on their debt instruments, except for countries like Nigeria and other people whose rating status is almost at the junk level. But it's not Yemi Cardoso's fault, though. I need to state it clearly. 95% of the problems we have in Nigeria are on the physical side. If today we are producing and exporting 2.8 million barrels of crude, just like we had in 2010 and condescends, we will have enough dollar inflow. If today we've diversified our economy and we are producing and exporting $250 billion worth of agro commodities, just like Netherlands is doing 120 billion euros annually, Nigeria will be awash with dollar. The central bank will be filled with dollar to the brim. We will have 4 times dollar inflow than outflow. And when we have 4 or 5 times dollar inflow than outflow, Yemi Cardoso can comfortably cut NPR to single digit, because he will have enough dollar reserve to defend the naira naturally, because the value of your local currency is mostly determined by the force of demand and supply, especially for a third world economy like Nigeria, whose currency is not a convertible currency like the euro, the pound sterling, and the US dollar. So we need to understand and appreciate basic economics. The problem we have in it, a majority of us don't even have understanding of what basic economics is and how these rates and how these economic variables interplay in the system. I can bet a finger that 95% of those in National Assembly, both upper and lower chamber, do not have basic understanding of how economies work and how policies and programs can influence productivity and catalyze productivity and other things. Most of us do not understand the implications of insecurity in Nigeria. Capital will always go to where it is safe and where it has the highest on investment. Money and capital is limited and fungible. It only flows to countries and economies where there is stability, where there is security of funds, and everything. The lawlessness in Nigeria. Nigeria today is seen as a cash and carry place for justice. The rating of the judiciary has plummeted to the lowest level in Nigeria. In fact, it is estimated that 8.5 out of 10 of those judicial players in the temple of justice are corrupt. It's procured to play. So how do you expect investors to come into a country where they are not sure of justice, where they know that justice can be perverted based on the highest bidder, where they know that somebody can steal their money and use half of the money to go and pay for judgment in courts in Nigeria, and then he will escape? So how do you expect an investor to come into a country where it is so obvious, glaringly obvious to the blind, that justice is for sale in Nigeria, where politicians brag on how they hold and control the justice and the ministers and the ministers in the temple of justice? How do you expect an investor to come into a country where over 2.2 million of their citizens were kidnapped in 1 year, 2.2 trillion paid as ransom, 6.3 million people murdered in 1 year when the country is not at war? A country that has 3.5 million people in IDP camps and 200,000 people in refugee camps. How do you expect an investor to be comfortable to invest in such an economy? And it's not as if we don't know what to do. The investor knows that some of us, like people like us, have profiled credible, sustainable solutions on how we can totally destroy insecurity within 1 year. But those in Abuja, in the state capitals, in local government, have decided to swallow death and the demon of dumbness and the blindness And they are all deaf to doing what is right for us to fix this economy, to build up a society where we have an all-inclusive wealth and prosperity for the people. Anyway, and for Joshua said, for me and my household, we will do the will of the Lord. Whatever you want to do, we'll keep on doing, we'll keep on talking. We'll keep on sharing the knowledge, nuggets and knowledge. But the fact is, a people, we get the kind of leadership that we deserve. All the hoodlums and the bandits destroying this country, both the political bandits and field bandits, our brothers, sisters, uncles, sons and daughters, grandfathers and grandmothers, cousins and nephews and nieces, we are all in this collectively. The day a majority of us decide on our own individual, looking into the mirror, I don't want to be part of this world, is the day this country will be fixed. Thank you and God bless.